Do you ever feel kind of icky inside when you think about sales? Well, today we're going to talk about how to get comfortable with sales even if you hate the idea of it. And there's no one better I can think to come on and talk about this than our friend from the North, Julie Broad. She's the #1 Amazon best-selling author, and she's a real estate investor. She's at the top of her game. And as I believe, and I think as Luis can agree, we love Canadians because they're just so dang friendly. So we can apply some of their principles, some of Julie's principles, and how to get comfortable with sales. We're so grateful to have Julie on the show.
Welcome to Thriving Launch with Luis Congdon and Kamala Chambers, the show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business. Maybe you can relate to this. When I was a full-time coach, keep repeating the same things to people over and over and over again, and it got to be kind of draining, and I wasn't really enjoying what I was doing anymore. So what I decided to do was record the things that I had to tell clients over and over and over again, and then I packaged those recordings together and sold them as an online course. If you're interested in creating and selling your own online course, head over to thrivinglaunch.com, and I have a free training for you on how to create and make passive income through your own online course.
We're here talking with Julie Broad. She's a #1 bestseller. She's an award-winning coach, a successful entrepreneur. She's recognized as a real estate investor and a popular speaker. We're so excited to have Julie on the show.
All right, so we're going to be talking about sales conversations, some more of the stuff that you guys love to talk about. Julie, welcome to the show. Welcome to Thriving Launch. Are you ready to launch?
I am. I can't wait.
That's awesome, because the thing that I love about what you're going to be talking about today is not just a sales conversation, but how do you have a sales conversation when you're not even comfortable doing it and getting into a sales conversation? I know you have a lot of experience on this, so where do you like to start people?
Yeah, you bet. So the biggest thing, and my background is from real estate, raising money. So asking people for $70,000 to $250,000 to invest in a property. And yet I am horribly uncomfortable with sales. So my first thing was switching it so that it's not focused on asking people for money or asking for the sale. It's focused on figuring out if the person across from me or on the phone from me is actually a fit for what I have to offer. So kind of taking the focus on, am I going to close this? And putting the focus on, is this the right person for me to be talking to?
I love that, because then it's not just, a lot of people like Luis and I would tend to be a little bit more heart-centered, I guess you could say, and we don't like selling people things they don't need. We don't want to sell anyone anything they don't need. And sales, I think, was challenging for both of us, right, Luis? And so I think a big thing is really looking at what people need, what their needs are, and if we can fulfill that need. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. So the first piece is you have to figure out who is your ideal person. Because a lot of people, as soon as somebody shows some interest, they kind of kick into sales mode. And sometimes it's because they've actually done some sales training and they know how to do it. But often it's because, a lot of us are selling things that we really believe in and we're excited to talk about them. So as soon as somebody shows any interest, you kind of, the light switch goes on and you start talking. But you don't know enough about the person across from you to put it in a context that they understand. So that's part of it. But the other piece is knowing who you're ideally suited to help, because no matter what you offer, not every single person is a good fit. So if I sell hair growth solutions, just for example, not every bald man, and I'm not picking on you, Luis.
Right.
I swear.
There's no hope. There's no hair ever coming back to his head, and I'm okay with that.
But if I sell hair growth solutions, so there you go, right? Not every bald man is my ideal client, because there's going to be guys that don't care. There's going to be guys that it's beyond hope, whatever it is. So I have to sit down and figure out, who is my ideal client? Because not everybody is.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely a great place to start with any marketing that you're doing and sales. You got to know who you're talking to and if they have the need that you're trying to fulfill. So this uncomfortable piece. Now, what if you're just really uncomfortable getting into the conversation? How do you address that?
Well, there's a couple pieces to it. First of all, one of the things I've learned, and I learned this actually from a mutual friend of ours, Scott Sylvan Bell. That's actually how I met Luis. But Scott said, what's one word that you think of when you hear the word salesperson? And so now just think about the words that come to your mind. And one of them is, when you ask people that, a lot of them, they're like slimy, pushy, aggressive, money hungry. But if that's what you're thinking of somebody that's a salesperson, it's not surprising you're uncomfortable because you don't want that to be you. So one of the things is to think about more positive words. For me, I kind of spin it on its head and think about, in sales, I'm solving somebody's problem. And if I'm not solving their problem, then I'm not going to sell to them. So I look at it as a problem solver. That's kind of the way I twisted that, so it's not an uncomfortable thing. The other thing is where and when you're doing the selling. So in an online world, a lot of us try to do the sales over email, and then maybe we eventually get on the phone, but we're not used to it. So you have to kind of know the time and the place for the sales, and to make sure that you're kind of setting everything up so that when you have that conversation, you already are in a more comfortable position. For me, I'm a high introvert who's also been uncomfortable with sales. What I did was build a brand so people come to me. And when they're coming to me, they already know kind of the solutions I offer and how I can help them. So they come to me already ready to learn about how I can help them.
I love this because if I could just replace all those sleazy, slick car sales or salespeople in my head with like a friendly Canadian from the north named Julie, it's gonna be so much better to do that. I love that. And so now that Luis, you want to jump in here because I know that you had some questions too.
Well, I mean, I think the mindset piece about how you think about yourself is excellent. And when I went through my process of trying to undo my aversion, I hated sales. I really, honestly, when I first started getting in my own business and stuff, I hated the idea of sales. I choked at the idea of sales. I'd give my content away or highly reduce it. And I didn't want to offend people, and I didn't want to be a sales guy. And that was deeply hurting my income, and so I did have to change that mindset about what it means to be a salesperson. I think that's really good. Do you have any other kind of insights around the mindset piece? Because I think one is how you identify salespeople is really going to impact how you go about sales. Do you have any other kind of tips around that?
Yeah, just something you just said triggers a lesson that I learned years ago when I started to help real estate investors, help them learn how to raise money and build real estate portfolios. I received a lot of advice to start an online membership site. And I wanted to help as many people as I could. And so I thought, I better make it really cheap. And so because I was thinking, I was uncomfortable selling it, but, I want to help a whole bunch of people. So I'm going to make it really cheap.
I'm laughing because this is the mindset that I was in once, that a lot of people are in.
Yeah. And so, it worked to a degree. Without really a lot of promotion, I had 150 members paying me $27 a month, and I was giving massive value, but it actually was, in my mind, a bomb. The whole thing was the upsell model, right? You were going to take them from that and then upsell them. And that's what the model, that I was taught to do. But from my perspective, I was a little uncomfortable with all of that. And then, to add to that, I thought, I got to give them so much value for this $27 because I was uncomfortable selling it. And it turned out nobody was even logging into the membership space. And the few people that weren't satisfied because I was trying to be everything to anyone that said they were interested in real estate. Basically, I made myself a commodity, and it didn't work. And, I had to focus in on a niche. And then as I focused in on a niche, I became more valuable to others because I could only help a certain group of people, but I could help them in a massive way. And by helping them, I still charged too little for quite a while, but eventually you start to see the massive results that you can help people get And bit by bit, I was able to, raise my prices and see my own value because I was seeing massive results from the people. But I think a lot of us have to start at that, try to help everyone or anyone, and slowly realize you're not a commodity. You have massive value. And if you don't have massive value, that's your first priority. You have to go out there and figure out where you can offer massive value.
Yeah, I kind of equated it to shooting a bunch of bullets in the dark, hoping to aim and hit your mark, and it's just like, it's just, you don't ever hit your target if you're just firing off in every direction.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of people worry that when you focus in, oh, I'm not going to get enough business. There's not going to be enough clients, but you have to be known for something and you can always branch out later. But it's so much easier to become known for something in a smaller niche and then go from there than it is to, try to be the person in North America or in the United States or even in, one state sometimes, start smaller, start local.
And, one of the other tough challenges that I found in the road to becoming a better salesperson was this challenge with people's resistance, people's aversion to having me bring up, a product or a sale or just not giving away the content for free, That was hard for me. And then I noticed it's hard for other people too, in some ways, especially initially. It feels really uncomfortable, maybe even more uncomfortable, or it felt more uncomfortable to me than it might feel to the other person. And especially when I, kind of came across certain kinds of things, like I don't have the money now, or maybe we could talk about it later. Or I'm not really sure. Let me talk to my partner, that kind of stuff. How do we learn how to get over some of those things?
Yeah, that's a good one. So basically, you're talking about the awkward objections that come up, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, when we were raising money, basically what we were doing was we would be asking people to put in all the money for a deal, and then we'd be splitting it 50-50. So we're not putting money into this property. Our investor does it. Now we do all the work for them. But one of the big awkward objections that we got for years was, you're not putting any skin in the game. You don't have any money in this deal. I'm taking all the risk. And the funny thing is that as we switched it and we focused on who is our ideal investor, and our ideal investor had way more money than they had time, right? They needed somebody who was competent, who knew what they were doing, who was going to take care of their money and not bother them with day-to-day decisions. That's what they needed. And when we were sitting across from that person, and the other big piece is we knew that we had exactly what they needed and what they wanted, then that objection didn't come up anymore. Because we had the right person across from us and we believed fully that we could deliver on what they needed.
So great.
I want to circle back around to something that you said earlier about building your personal brand and having people come to you. I'd love to hear more about that, some of your top tips on building your personal brand so people come to you and that you don't have to be uncomfortable because they want what you have to offer.
Yeah, you bet. The thing for us, it happened by accident that I built my brand, but it was the best thing that we could have done. I love to write, and I just started writing articles for all kinds of publications in North America, and then eventually I focused in on mostly writing for Canadians. But as I did it, I found that people with money called us and wanted to invest their cash with us. There was no more of this going out and trying to find them. And, it was just by building a profile that it made a big difference. But then as I started to help other people build their brand, I started to kind of see some of the big pieces. Now, a lot of people, they build a website and they have a logo and they say, well, I've got a brand, right? I got a professional headshot. I'm good to go. But those are tools that you can use to showcase your brand, but that's not really your brand. Your brand, when we're talking about entrepreneurs and selling, your brand is your message and how you package yourself up, what other people see when they see you walk in a room or see you online, and how you add value. Really, that's what your brand is. And of course, what makes you unique. Your brand is you, and then you'll showcase it with logos and websites and things like that. But the big thing is getting clear on who you are and how you help. And it seems simple, but we're actually masters of disguise. We bury ourselves under masks and layers to kind of protect ourselves from judgment and things like that. So showing people who you actually are isn't as easy as it sounds.
Beautifully said. Absolutely. And I think that the risks that we take online and in our business really pay off the big things that we put out there and are, I know that people are the most responsive when I post about the struggles or like the real stuff, So before we sign off today, I'm wondering if there's any last questions that you had, Luis, or any last nuggets that you want to make sure that we all walk away with.
One of the big things I recommend people do is when they are in a conversation with somebody and it seems like a potential sales situation, rather than talking, ask a few questions. And I don't want you to interrogate the other person, because that's the drawback. When people hear, questions control the conversation, suddenly they think they're the chief interrogator and they got to ask the other person all these questions. But instead of worrying about whether you're going to get the sale, focus on whether this person is a fit and ask really good questions to understand. Understanding what their challenges what their challenges are right now. If there's anything in particular that they already have tried that has worked or not worked, and what they were and weren't happy about. My mother-in-law was trying to buy a car, and she had test driven 3 other cars, and she went to this dealership and test drove their car. And they asked her what other cars she test drove. And that's the only question he asked her. So he didn't know anything about the other cars. He started knocking them down. Anything about what she thought about the other cars, he started knocking them down. And he could have asked her, oh, what did you like about each of these cars? What didn't you like? And now based on that, he could have said, well, this car has everything you like, right? Everything you liked about those 3 cars you test drove, this car has all of it. Right? He could have positioned himself by listening and asking good questions, but he didn't. And she left and didn't buy the car from him.
Well, it's been so great to have you on the show, Julie. We've been listening to Julie Broad, and you've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. We've got some great resources for you and a way to get in touch with Julie and learn more about all the amazing stuff that she's doing. She's got some good stuff for you guys over at thrivinglaunch.com. So we'll see you over there, and tune in next week.
You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there.
How would you like to be able to learn at a faster rate? How would you like to have your education, or anytime you're reading anything and you're learning something, to be able to learn in a much more powerful way that sits with you and stays with you? Well, on our next episode, we have Dr. Kathleen Hendricks. She's a psychologist, author, inspirational speaker, motivator. Kathleen Hendricks joins us to talk about how we can use the body for increased knowledge and wisdom. And as always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes